Paternity leave is to be introduced in the public sector while maternity leave is to be extended. Response teams trying to contain a fire at the Riverton disposal site. 72-year-old retiree shot dead last night by gunmen at his home in St. James. Jamaican-born American who is wanted by U.S. prosecutors for securities fraud arrested in Jamaica. In business news, oil prices plunged by more than $8. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark has announced that paternity leave is to be introduced in the public sector, while maternity leave is to be extended. Maternity leave will move from 40 days to 3 months. Speaking at a media briefing a short while ago, the finance minister said workers will also benefit from family leave.
Coming out of the compensation restructure and in reviewing the terms and conditions of service, the government of Jamaica has decided to update the terms of maternity leave and to introduce a provision for paternity leave and leave for adoptive parents in the public service. All of these are components of total compensation. The government of Jamaica intends to update the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 to increase maternity leave from 40 days to 3 calendar months. The government of Jamaica also intends to update the Public Service Staff Orders of 2004 to introduce paternity leave for the first time in the public service for fathers of newborns for a specific time and under specific terms to be finalized.
Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark. Circulars outlining the new benefits will be issued by September. And low-income earners in the public sector will be receiving assistance with back-to-school expenses. Dr. Clark says the details of the support program will be announced shortly.
For persons at the lowest end of the spectrum, remember, we don't have resources to intervene for everyone, but for persons who earn at the lowest levels of the public service, we'll be working on ways in which we can make the support available to you. And I will announce that in greater detail very shortly, clearly, because it would have to be in place for August. But it will be targeted, it will be open to persons who are earning at the lowest levels in the public service. And the reason why we would be doing this at this time is, simply because the new compensation won't be in place it's unlikely to be in place prior to those back to school expenses.
Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark. Firefighters and personnel from the National Solid Waste Management Authority, NSWMA, are now battling a fire at the Riverton disposal site in Kingston. Executive Director of the NSWMA, Audley Gordon, told Radio Jamaica News that efforts are being made to contain the blaze. Mr. Gordon told Radio Jamaica News that the fire started at the tipping site sometime after 1 o'clock this afternoon. He says strong winds could cause the fire to spread.
Mr. Calvert McLeod, our landfill director, is dispatched to oversee the operation. I know that the fire brigade was already called and that we are putting in a full court press to get this under control as quickly as possible. We should be able to, because we have enough stockpile material on site, and we also have heavy-duty equipment that are functioning at the location at this time. So therefore, all things going according to plan, we should be in good stead before nightfall based on what we see currently.
Executive Director of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, Audley Gordon. A 72-year-old retiree was shot dead by gunmen in St. James last night. Investigators reported that about 10 o'clock, Norman Brown was at his house in West Green when two men drove up in a Toyota Mark X. The men entered the property and shot Mr. Brown, who was sitting on his veranda. No motive has been established for the attack. A man was shot dead in his car park in the car park of the Kingston Public Hospital this afternoon. Shortly after midday, the 20-year-old man was in the car park selling guineps when he was approached by a gunman. He was shot in the back while attempting to flee and has been hospitalized. There have been several shootings in the KPH car park over the past few months as rival gangs battle for control of the extortion racket at the location. In the meantime, the Kingston West Police are probing the shooting of an 18-year-old man who turned up at KPH this morning. He told investigators he was walking on Slide Road when he heard gunshots and later realized he was shot. And a suspect who was being sought in connection with a double shooting in St. James has been charged by the police. 23-year-old Mark Williams, who was captured earlier this month, has been charged with murder and wounding with intent. Mr. Williams is implicated in the murder of Lavin James and the wounding of another man during an incident in Timber Close in Irwin on July 2. A Jamaican-born American who is wanted by U.S. prosecutors for securities fraud has been arrested by the local police. 59-year-old Jerome Austin, a retired business executive of Stamford, Connecticut, and Flemington Drive in St. Andrew, was arrested today on a provisional extradition warrant by CTOC detectives. He is wanted in New York for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and false statements. He's booked to appear before the St. Andrew Parish Court on Thursday. Radio Jamaica News was informed that Mr. Austin was taken into custody on another matter. While in custody, it was discovered that he was wanted by the U.S. Justice Department. A St. James man who was extradited to the U.S. last week appeared before a federal court in Scranton, Pennsylvania today on lottery scamming charges. 40-year-old Damone Oakley, who is from Point District in St. James, is accused of participating in a phony sweepstakes scheme that targeted elderly victims in the U.S. The Jamaican is charged in a 16-count indictment with mail and wire fraud. Victims throughout the U.S. received mail, text messages or phone calls in which they were falsely told that they had won millions of dollars and luxury vehicles in a sweepstakes, but needed to pay taxes and fees in order to claim their winnings. The victims were directed to send money to Mr. Oakley and individuals in the U.S. and elsewhere who served as intermediaries. The indictment alleges that victims are also directed to purchase electronics, jewelry, and clothing and ship the items to mail forwarding services in Florida. Dancehall producer Shabdan is to stand a trial on November 28 for allegedly breaching the Corruption Prevention Act. The date was set today in the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court. The case file has been completed. Attorney Donahue Martin, who is representing Shabdan, told the judge that his client, who is on bail in the matter, would not appear in court. It is alleged that the music producer, whose given name is Linville Thompson Jr., offered a policeman $2 million last October to remove an illegal firearm from his vehicle before it was searched. Mr. Martin explained that Mr. Thompson, who is charged with 3 counts of murder arising from a shooting in Rose Heights, St. James, is in custody in relation to that case. Former University of the West Indies lecturer Dr. Christine Cummings is calling for Jamaican athletes heading to the Commonwealth Games later this month to stage a protest against the British government. The Games will be held July 28 to August 8. Dr. Cummings is suggesting that the athletes kneel to register their disgust at the ill treatment of Jamaicans, some of whom are residents in the UK. Speaking with Radio Jamaica News this morning, the former lecturer in the Department of Government said she was incensed at the report of British resident Tiffany Ellis, who is stranded in Jamaica with her 15-month-old son. According to a report in Britain's Guardian newspaper, Mrs. Ellis gave birth to her son on April 30 last year in Jamaica and has been trying to return to the UK ever since. Mrs. Ellis has been told by Britain's Home Office that the child cannot go to the UK because he has an established life on the island. Dr. Cummins says the treatment of the family amounts to racism.
First of all, there's a medical situation with COVID. Secondly, she could not travel. She lives in England. She has British citizenship. So does her husband. So does their other child. This is absolutely ridiculous. My position on this is it is time for our athletes to kneel for us. And I would like to hear from our athletes, former and present, particularly those heading to the Commonwealth Games, to find out what is their stance on. When are they going to stand up for these Jamaican victims of Windrush and its racist aftermath?
Former University of the West Indies lecturer Dr. Christine Cummings. She says the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should intervene. In a letter of refusal of the baby's visa application, Home Office officials said the decision is justified by the need to maintain an effective immigration and border control and will not have unjustifiably harsh consequences. They added that the baby's life can continue as it is now in Jamaica with financial support from his mother in the UK. The Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, says its national plan of action to address the problem of street and working children in Jamaica is being crafted. The plan is being developed by a multi-agency technical working group. Director of Children and Family Programs at the CPFSA, Warren Thompson, says discussions are ongoing based on the findings from a study commissioned 2 years ago.
One of the things that we have found is that regarding street and working children, there are specific communities that these children are coming from. You see a child in Barbican, where are you coming from? Majestic Gardens. What are you doing at Barbican Square?
That's far away from home.
It is far away. They travel far away to go to work. So one of the things that we are doing at the CPFSA, I don't know if you're aware that in 2019, we actually did a street and working children study. And based on that, we are currently crafting a national plan of action to address the street and working children issue.
Mr. Thompson says there are various reasons for children to be living on the street and working. He says as a result of the grey areas, the intervention has to be carefully developed.
There are less visible ways in which children are victims of child labor. So, for example, the child who misses out on a day of school because he or she has to help out on the farm or have to prepare goods for market, it's a practice that still happens. Or, a child who is made to take care of other children or even elderly persons and therefore can't attend school. And I'm not saying children should not do chores. I really believe that children should do chores. But if the work that the child is doing is preventing the child from going to school or preventing the child from having fun, to play and to relax and so on, then it is also child labor.
Director of Children and Family Programs at the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, Warren Thompson. Mr. Thompson was speaking today on TVJ Small Jamaica. 38,000 children between the ages of 5 and 17 are involved in child labor in Jamaica. In the meantime, Mr. Thompson says the CPFSA is continuing its public education campaign about child labor in Jamaica. He says it is clear from some of the reports received at the agency that information is lacking.
Many persons, when they're reporting something, they know something is happening to the child, but they can't really tell you that it is child labor. They're taking, as we say in Jamaica, disadvantage. They're taking advantage of the child, or the child, it feels as if he or she is being victimized, or they're taking a set on him or her. Yeah. But what is really happening is that the child is being exploited and someone else is gaining. So you move the child from country to town and the child is exploited while in town, and it happens. And I think when we tell people that this is what it is, their eyes get open, to say, that used to happen to me, or that happened to people that I know, or I thought that was a normal thing. But we want Jamaicans to know that this is not normal.
Director of Children and Family Programs at the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, Warren Thompson. The number of persons in hospital with COVID-19 has increased to 105, up from 98 Sunday. 46 new cases of the virus are detected from 259 samples yesterday, resulting in a positivity rate of 19.7%. In Guyana, a High Court judge has sentenced a 36-year-old laborer to 2 life terms in jail after he was found guilty of raping and robbing a 20-year-old woman at gunpoint in January 2013. The judge's sentencing, Robert Armstrong, said that he should be given the 2 terms after he completes a 4-year jail sentence for an earlier conviction on an armed robbery charge. Sitting in the sexual offences court in Demerara, the judge said the court was compelled to impose a sentence that's commensurate with the serious nature and prevalence of the offences. She also considered the physical, psychological, and emotional trauma the woman was left to endure, that a gun was used during the commissioning of the offences, and that Armstrong committed the crimes while he was on bail for other offences. Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled the country following mass protests over the island's economic crisis. The president had been in hiding after crowds stormed his palace on Saturday. Sources told the BBC that his brother, the former finance minister Basil Rajapaksa, also left the crisis-hit country. Protesters had demanded the president and the prime minister go or face much bigger demonstrations. The president's younger brother was prevented from leaving the country 24 hours early, but is now said to be heading to the United States.